Hi, Alex. It's such a pleasure to have you as my podcast guest today.
Wonderful to meet you. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure, and I'm really, really excited to learn more about you, your story, and talk about the art market because I have a lot of questions. But as usual, I have a few warm-up questions that I ask every guest on this podcast. So the first one, if you can meet any artist, who would it be and why?
Great question. There's a lot of people who I would be interested in talking with. The person who usually comes to mind when I get asked this is Philip Guston. There's this video that I've seen from SF MoMA, which is about the mysteries of the working process. And in just a couple minutes, he kind of sums up what the entire creative process is. He talks about kind of the creation and destruction of a painting in real time, and he says something to the effect of, in making this piece, it felt too much like a painting where it was additions of this and this and that and that. And he said, I'm seeking this kind of simplicity in my art where it can't be this and this and that and that. The whole thing just is there. And I always think, wow, there's so many artists I talk with about creative process, and to be able to kind of articulate it that way. I would love to have a full conversation with him about this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like, I know quite a few artists who have a process of construction and destruction in their practice. And for me, it's always fascinating to know, like, where is this final, like, I'm satisfied with this piece because you can just keep going on and on with your work.
Right. How do you ever know? I mean, there's such a weird fine line of what works and doesn't, and so many people struggle with that. So yeah, I've always been fascinated by this description, and kind of seeing him do it in real time was pretty cool too.
And then if you can acquire any piece, price not an issue, what would it be?
This is like the most impossible question for me. I get asked this from time to time. It's like eating one potato chip. I think I think if I really had to narrow it down, I would probably pick a Caravaggio. I really like this series of the Calling of Saint Matthew. There, there's three of these paintings, but that one in particular in this series, they're so dark and brilliant. And I'm not a fan of religious art particularly, but they kind of ushered in a whole new era of kind of from Renaissance to contemporary painting. They changed the game, and they're so beautiful and powerful. So I think I would say that, but I don't know, picking one piece is near impossible for me.
I know it's a tough question, but I can definitely relate. I did my undergrad in Renaissance and Baroque art and architecture, so I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
For sure. And then when we talk about art, we always think about galleries and museums, but what are some unexpected places you saw and experienced great art?
Well, I spent about 15 years living and working in San Francisco. And before that, I had grown up in Arizona, and mostly in a small artist community. I hadn't really been familiar with street art, but San Francisco's filled with it. You go around the corner just about anywhere, and there are well-known street artists, and then there are just people getting their start. And you realize art exists everywhere, like that on every side of a building, every garage door, even light posts and things like that. And so I think it's just about kind of attuning your senses to realize art is all around us, and it can exist in so many forms too. It doesn't just have to be paintings and sculptures, but even the way people express themselves.
That's so true. And we always don't talk that much about street art and everything that's happening, even like art installations. Every time I'm like going on the street, people are on their phones. They don't look even like in front of them, but there's so much to see art, life, people in general.
Yeah, and I like that kind of art too because it's so immediate and deals with all of these contemporary things. I think mostly people are really, expressing what's happening around them in that kind of art form too. So it can be really raw and powerful. And yeah, looking up from your phone is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your opinion, what makes a work of art timeless or iconic?
Hmm. Well, I think for me, art has always been about this description of the human condition and what it feels like, all of our emotions. Even when I was asked recently about what my favorite artwork was, I kind of have this flood of pieces. Mostly it's the things that I fell in love with when I was first studying art history, and I still love those pieces. And I see this interesting link with all of them, like the Caravaggio portraits, or there's a piece by Jacques-Louis David, The Death of Marat. There's a Caillebotte piece from the Impressionist era of these men scraping a floor in an apartment building. They're all really a lot about life and death, or just the daily process and how we all feel. And I think, or even like Philip Guston's kind of crazy portraits, you could take them out of any of these particular periods when they were created. They still have the same impact, that kind of feeling of being human. So I feel like the timelessness is, for me, it's the pieces that kind of express how we're all feeling, because that's unchanged, even if it's today or 200 years ago or 500 years ago. We all kind of have that same connection. That's what makes us human. So
So
yeah, I
true.
think.
Absolutely. And you started talking a little bit about your life and your move around. Maybe we'll go a little bit back in time and talk about your childhood. I know your mom is an artist, right?
She is, yes. She was a potter for many years.
And were you a curious child? Were you drawing, painting? Like how did you got into art and being curious about it?
Yeah, I grew up in a really unique place. It's a little mountain town in Arizona. It had been a copper boom town, and then it was a ghost town. And then in the 60s, a group of artists moved up into this place, and they inhabited all the old buildings and started making art together. And my mom was one of these kind of hippie people who moved up there. She was making pottery at the time. And so I grew up in a community of artists. So I was making art like most kids all the time. My uncle is a wood sculptor, and I would make all of these interesting kind of assembly pieces with his scrap blocks. And when I was maybe 4 or so, I sold one of these pieces to one of my mom's friends who had a hotel in the area. And I mean, this was, 35, 40 years ago. And that piece is still in their little cabinet in the entry of the hotel. So yeah, I grew up with that whole sense of the artist side, and it was really amazing. My mom also kind of transitioned as I was a kid from just making her work to her own gallery that she was running. So she was selling more of other people's work, and that's really, I think, where I grew up with this whole idea of UGallery didn't just come from nowhere. It was really something that I'd grown up with.
Yeah, and also when you went to university, you studied art, but you also took an entrepreneurship program. So I think it's at that time where you thought about combining the two, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I went to school. I was really unsure of what I wanted to study in school, and I started with art history. Actually, I didn't start with art history. I started with several other things, but I made my way to art history, and really, I felt like that was such a good fit for me. But at my mom's encouragement, she said, "You need to have something practical when you finish with school, so you should consider also studying some business." And the business school there had this very cool program, a year-long course where they teach you about coming up with a business idea, writing a plan, and then how do you pitch it. And I was also studying some sculpture as well at school. And I told my classmates, in school with all these really talented artists, but the leap from being a student artist to a professional working artist is huge. It's very difficult to make that transition. So we came up with this idea, and this was in 2006, so pretty novel at the time, of an online gallery that would help emerging artists kind of launch their careers and then also connect clients with accessible original art. In the school, they loved the idea. They helped us along, and then they sent us to some business case competitions at the end of the year. We went to the premier competition in the US and a big competition in Canada at Queen's University, and we happened to win them. They had cash prizes, and it was kind of a big moment, but we said, okay, let's pool our prize winnings and pretty much every cent in our bank accounts and launch this business. So I launched the company with one of my classmates, and that was beginning of UGallery. It was almost 20 years ago now.
Wow, that's fantastic. And knowing that 20 years ago, this idea of having an online gallery was relevant and a lot of people were excited about it, because I always feel that a lot of people criticize online galleries in so many ways that like you can't see the pieces. Oh, we don't know what we are buying and things like that. What is your feeling like 20 years ago when you opened the gallery now? Did anything change with so many things that happened?
Lots has changed. The first question that we got in the early days was, will anyone actually buy any art online? But I think we were also really at the forefront of this technology working for art. This was before people were buying cars and steaks and everything else online. The whole industry kind of came up around us. So I think we were lucky to be early, but not too early. And my perception is things have really normalized a lot now that people buy everything else online. It's a lot more acceptable. Art still is kind of a final frontier, but we've even seen this kind of amazing shift in what technology exists since then. You have to remember there weren't iPhones in 2006
Hmm.
to shoot pictures of your art and things like that. So all these little processes that make it so much easier now, where you can photograph a work really easily, post pictures, write a description. It was a little more difficult then, but I do believe in seeing how we've developed our customer base and who's buying online, which is typically older people, our target customers, uh, mid 40s to late 60s. So these are people who aren't digital natives, but they've kind of really adopted this way of consuming art. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a totally different world than it was then.
For sure, for sure. It's very interesting even to hear the collector's base that you have in mind with the gallery, because there is a lot of talking right now about collectors in their 30s who are just starting out, would love to tap into the market. And I would think like right away, they might be the people who will buy through online galleries. But again, in my experience, is the same even in galleries online, like when people buy when they're not in that city or country, it's still people in their 40s, 50s, and
Yeah,
those.
yeah, absolutely. When we launched UGallery, I thought this is going to be so cool. All of my friends who are in their early 20s are going to get to own original art. And it was pretty slow and quick, but we realized that wasn't our target audience, because people who are in their 20s are graduating from school and they need to buy pots and pans and sofas, and then they're going to get married and they're going to have children, and really most people don't have the disposable income for original art until later in their life. In fact, the joke I always hear in the art world is people buy their first original art after their last kid finishes college and before their first sports car. And that plays true. I mean, we see our audiences that way. And it takes time to appreciate art as well. You have to learn some sort of kind of basics of what you like and spend the time to visit galleries and museums. And I get it. It's not necessarily where most young people's heads are at, and that's fine.
Absolutely. And talking about the market in general, like I know you spent almost 15 years in San Francisco, now you're based in Amsterdam. Have you seen any differences in the markets back home in the States and in Europe in general?
Yeah, I think all these places are unique. And certainly my focus is really on the online side of the art world too. So it's even different than the physical galleries. I am still very new here in Amsterdam. So we've been here about a year and a half. So I still am just kind of scratching the surface. San Francisco was fascinating, especially because we moved there at a time when tech was kind of at a low point and the city was mostly filled with artists. And then there was this huge shift over that next 10 years where there was a lot more money, and people kept talking about how are we going to convert all of this tech money into uh, art interest. And I think it ran up against the same things we were just talking about, which is these were young people, so they weren't necessarily inclined to be buying original art. And also, there was this whole long history of art that existed in San Francisco before this kind of flash of tech money. And I think it really is an artist town before being a collector's town. You look at the art that exists in the museums there and what the patronage have been like. And it was always a great place to go buy a painting for like $400 or $500. That's what I remember. And it kind of continued that way. San Francisco is just unique in that regard. And yeah, every place is very different. I'm sure where you're at, there's a whole subset of what exists for what people are willing to spend. And we operated a gallery in San Francisco for a number of years where we had our office. And what we found was we would put shows on, get lots of people to come to the show, and then they never buy anything. And then we just sell the paintings on our website. So over time, we evolved and said, it doesn't make any sense for us to spend all the effort to put on physical shows. We'll just maintain our website. And so that's kind of where our business shifted to over time.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to hear because I'm based in Toronto, and more galleries, especially those who have physical spaces, are talking about, oh, people don't come to receptions. Oh, people usually pre-buy as like during the advanced preview or during the show, they don't come, they just phone in or email more and more and more. So the question of receptions, like, are we going to have receptions anymore? Like, is it going to be even a thing?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I really do believe in the importance of showing art in person, going and seeing art in person. That's something that can't be replicated as an experience, but I get it from a business standpoint too, where I'm trying to sell art for a living. I'm going to do what's most practical. And like I said, it takes a lot of work to do all of those events. And if you don't see a return from them, it's hard to justify it. I don't know. I mean, having grown up in a traditional gallery and now doing it this way, I can see arguments for both, but I think again, it just depends on where you are, where are you located in the world, and what works for your audience.
Exactly. And there are quite a few online galleries on the market right now, talking about the big ones like Saatchi, Artsy, and whatnot, Single Art. How is
Yeah.
UGallery different? What sends it apart from so many other platforms on the market?
Yeah, I think our main differentiator is really in that we're a completely curated gallery. So the ones you mentioned are all marketplaces, which means that in most cases, any artist can show their work in anything they want, or in the case of Artsy, any gallery can post their work there. Versus UGallery, we focus on the artists and artworks that we want to show like a traditional gallery. So we have really close relationships with the artists we work with, and then we pick everything we put on the site. So everything you find on UGallery is original, one of a kind. It's all hand selected by our curators. And then we have this really interesting process where we accept applications on our website. We accept maybe 5% of artists who apply, and we also search out artists. But then once that process is kind of in place, we spend a lot of time getting to know people. We have welcome calls with our artists to better understand who they are, to help them along. And then we have really long-term relationships with our artists. I'm still working with some of the same people from 2006, if you can believe that. So it really is for us about developing relationships on the artist side and then on the client side as well, because I think people come to UGallery for different reasons. Maybe they do live in urban centers with galleries, but don't have the time to go and shop the galleries, or they're just so far geographically away from gallery centers. This is an opportunity to substitute that. But for us, it's really important to develop relationships with our customers. If people want to shop anonymously, they can. But for us, it's important that if they want to have a relationship, they want to talk about art, we're here for that. We do everything from calling clients to sending a handwritten note for every order that gets placed on UGallery. So for me, these kind of personal connections that existed traditionally in galleries should still function in our online gallery space. And I think that's really what separates us.
Yes, I agree 100%. It's all about the connections. It's all about making sure people feel valued, or you even become like an art friend in a way to so many collectors that they can
Yeah.
email, phone you and say, "Oh, I just saw this. What do you think?" Like that's how I feel. This connection, people feel like, "Oh, I know to whom I can go to when I have questions about art."
Yeah, absolutely. Questions about anything. And then I think over time you do develop kind of personal relationships where you know about the family, their children, their dogs, that sort of thing. And that's nice. I think people are looking for all these different types of connections in the world. So even in a high tech kind of environment, it's nice to still give people the time of day to just, enjoy a conversation and that sort of thing.
Yes, and I really like that the gallery is curated because I've heard so many stories of people being on those marketplaces and their work is not seen, not shown. No one is like buying it. So when artists considering applying to your gallery, what they should think about, what type of work you're looking for at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have kind of a criteria that we think about when we look at artist applications. Um, we look kind of first to see, does the artist have a signature style, something that you could define as their work, and this kind of cohesion that exists. Can you say like, okay, they have a whole series of this work that can be marketed? We look to see if the work is a good fit price-wise. Most of the art we sell on UGallery is priced somewhere between $500 and $10,000. So that's kind of the entry level to the original art market. And then also seeing, is the work presentation ready? Is it well finished? You know, these are small things, but everything from, did they use good quality materials? Is the painting finished on the sides? And then we also check to see, okay, we represent about 300 artists from around the world. So that's a little and a lot, but how does it fit within the whole portfolio? Does it make sense alongside these other artists' work? Is there going to be too much overlap? Or is it too disjointed that even though we like it from a particular standpoint, it just doesn't fit? And we're trying to match clients and artists as well. So does it fit with who our collector is? We have a very specific profile of a person we talk to. We call her Mary. We have 2 pages written about Mary, who she is, what her interests are, everything. So most of what we do within our efforts as a gallery for curating and storytelling all revolve around talking to this particular person. And so that's kind of our way of we approaching curating the gallery and what art we take and who we work with.
Yes, and you do have a really great collection. Like 300 is way less than all of those marketplace have. I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of artists they represent, quote unquote. And it's so hard for clients even to search for what they like. There's so many options. And I feel like with Instagram, especially these days, selecting or
Yeah.
understanding your taste becomes harder and harder because you don't know, is artist a good artist or not. So I feel like online galleries or like art advisors like yourself, myself, like we're having a very important role this day. So in a way filtering
Yeah.
but at the same time educating.
Absolutely. Well, I think we see ourselves as storytellers first and foremost. So it's about telling one good story at a time about an artist or an artwork. And that's a big deal. You're right. There's so much out there. There's a couple of these sites where they have features where you can find a work you like and press a button to see other similar works. And it'll pull up, I don't know, 100 or 200 paintings that all look the same. And then suddenly you think, well, did I pick the right one? Does this piece have value anymore? And for me, it's going in the other direction. We're taking all the effort to kind of filter out what we think makes sense. And that's not to say that any of that work is less important or less valuable, but that at least it has some sort of kind of fit within what we do. And hopefully we connect with clients who think similarly in terms of aesthetics and value and good stories, because that's it, just connecting people with one piece of art at a time. That's the best I can do as a gallerist.
Exactly. And while the gallery is online, you were doing art fairs, the New York Affordable Art Fair, for example. What was
Yeah.
your experience and would you do fairs again?
Yeah, it's a good question. We did the affordable art fairs for a lot of years, almost 10 years. And those are great shows. They get tons of foot traffic. I really like the affordable art fair series because the whole notion is they have fairs around the world, but they want collectors to come in, buy the art off the wall, wrap it up, and walk out the door with it. And so it's fun. It's less kind of staid than more kind of established fairs where all the art stays on the wall in the same place for the 5 days. And there's a good buying excitement. And we sold a ton of art at those fairs. Sometimes we would take a couple hundred pieces and sell most of them. So that was really exciting. But as a flip side, and why we stopped doing fairs is it just, again, it didn't quite fit what our business was. we were going to those fairs initially because we wanted to use them as an opportunity to drive more business back to our website. And what we found was the people who came to the fairs, they were just all about the fairs. They didn't come and check out UGallery after the fact. We did so many things to try and promote that, giving people discounts, following up with them with specific pieces from the same artist, anything we could think of. And we never converted those people into being customers on our website. So for us, it was a lot of hard work to do the fairs. And some galleries make it their whole business. They just do kind of the fair circuit where they go from one fair to the next with a huge crate of artworks and they kind of replenish as they go. And I think you could make a great business as a gallery doing that if you want to do that, because it's a lot of physical work and obviously a lot of time away from home. But for us, only doing a couple fairs a year, it was a lot of extra work. And then even though the business was good, it was so separate from our core concept that it just didn't quite fit. So, I mean, I guess for anyone asking, just make sure it's the direction you want to go, and then you can see if it works for you.
Yes, and even this conversion of clients in general, like when I feel like anyone working in the industry in the commercial world, having clients who are established clients and buy maybe every year or every couple of years, quote unquote, like warm audience, it's always nice for that relationship. And we try
Yeah.
to convert people and not to have them as like one-time purchaser. They come and go because it's way harder to sustain the business if almost every client is like that. So fairs, from your experience and like hearing from other people who are doing fairs, it's the same thing. It's very hard to take those clients further in the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Different costs for kind of establishing that first customer, but you're right. The cost of a repeat client versus a new one are so different. And yeah, the again back to having relationships with people, and we're not trying to develop some sort of huge collector base to raise up the prices of our artists' work a thousandfold. That's not the mission of our gallery, but at the same time, we are trying to develop a base of collectors who come back and support artists, because that's really good for the artists over time. And that's hard to do that in a physical experience.
For sure. And then you do have a platform, you do have amazing products, and now you need to find those clients. So, what are your marketing strategies for the gallery?
Uh, Yeah, really interesting. We have this whole kind of idea, as I was saying, of being storytellers. We really think about every artist we bring on and every artwork we choose as some way to tell clients something new, to show them something unique. So for artists, we write bios and artist statements for each of them. And then we write unique descriptions for every artwork we put on the site. So that gives people this kind of experience of coming to the gallery. If we were standing there, this is what we would say to them. But then after that, we really look for marketing tactics that are very kind of technology focused and trackable. So we look for things where we can follow people's path to conversion. Everything can be measurable. That's a big deal. So we use a lot of email marketing, which is really great for us, a lot of SEM, search engine marketing, and we've been doing SEO since 2006. We really didn't have a lot of money in the early days. So we focused a lot of time on that because that was something that was just basically our attention. And that's paid off for us for years now. And all of these things are nice because you can track them using analytics software and you can see what's working. We had experimented in the past with a lot of other strategies like magazine ads and newspaper ads and things like that. And you just don't know. You put out the advertising into the sea, and even if you use coupons or something like that, you have no idea of really tracking how it's going for you. So we really try and say, if it can't be measured, it shouldn't be used. And that really aligns with us as being an online company too.
And then when you're doing your marketing, you kind of, I think, in a way, have some ideas of like what's trending in the moment, what types of art people are searching for. What is popular, quote unquote, with clients right now with your gallery? Like, is there a specific style or genre?
It's really interesting. That always changes. Art fairs are really a cool way to see this too, because if you go to art fairs year after year, you'll see things pop up that will be hot for a while and they totally disappear. And I've also kind of seen too how this relates to how people are feeling generally in the world. Like when times are good, the economy's good, things are booming, people want this kind of edgy, shiny, aggressive art. People buy art with guns in it or shiny skulls, things like that. And when the world is feeling a little more kind of reserved or down, people buy birds' nests and pastoral landscapes. And one thing I've been reflecting about recently, uh, we had seen we had a huge business for abstract art for many years, and then in the late 2000 teens, that business almost went away. I was really surprised people stopped buying abstract paintings, and I couldn't figure it out. We had some really great work on the site, and I don't know, maybe in the last, I don't know, 7 to 10 months, that business has come back so strong again. And I don't know why. Some of these things make more sense, but also sometimes you just see shifts. Maybe it's what people are reading about in interior design or elsewhere. But yeah, lately I've seen our business for abstract art has just come back so strong. So really interesting to watch that.
Yeah, the same thing here. I feel like it's sometimes trends or what people see in the magazines, or sometimes designers coming back and say, oh, like abstract art. For us in general in Toronto, abstract is the strongest market. And then throughout Canada, I would say landscape. But again,
Yeah.
people buy all types of things. I read a couple of days ago that surrealism will be coming back. It's one of the
Hmm.
hottest genre on the market. So we'll see.
It's very interesting. I mean, I do believe to some extent what people really want overall doesn't change much, like landscapes and still lifes, and that stuff is just kind of timeless. And so, if you're looking at art from both a lens of um, pure collecting versus decorating, there are these kind of fine lines of balance, but typically people want stuff that they can live with in their home. Um, yeah, it's kind of an enduring fact. And even you see at the high end auctions, people are still buying things that are, in certain colors and sizes and things. It still has to fit in the penthouse elevator to get upstairs, that kind of practical discussion when you're buying art.
Yeah, and that actually relates to my question about buying your first original piece. What advice do you
Hmm.
have for collectors? Like, what are the steps? Where should they go? What should they read? Things like that.
To buy your first original piece?
Mhm.
Well, I think I think with anything, you want to learn, take time to see what you like. Tastes change a lot over time. Anything that you start buying, wherever you start with, you're going to end in a totally different place. So my advice always to people getting started out is look a lot first before you buy something. Um, get an idea of what interests you, and then wait a little longer and see. Um, talking about art fairs are a great way to see a lot of art quickly from a lot of galleries. But I also don't advise people getting started out to buy from fairs because it's very fast paced and you have to decide quickly. Otherwise, it disappears. Um, but once you start to get an idea, then I think setting a budget is good. You can find really great, well made art for starting at a couple $100s and up. So the first things you buy don't have to be so expensive. And what I started doing when I was first buying art is I set a goal for myself to buy a piece every year. And my budget has changed since then, but I buy a piece of art every year. And I don't go over that, and I always try and buy at least something because it kind of suits my style, and it's really nice. Then you have this evolution of what you like. I also believe in kind of pruning as time goes on. If things don't really suit you anymore, there's an opportunity that you could pass it on to someone else in the family. I started giving art to the younger generation in the family or friends who needed things for their house, and not being convinced that whatever you buy is original, you have to keep for the rest of your life. Because I think people see art as a little more rarefied than other things. Like you wouldn't keep, say, your dishware your whole life. You're going to get new dishware, but people see art as this thing that's an absolute that once they own it, they have to keep it. And try and explain, well, it is important, it is a special thing, but you don't necessarily have to be the one who shepherds it for the rest of your life. And I think that gives people a little more flexibility to also try and realize that even if the first things they buy aren't the thing that they want to keep later. They don't have to hold on to it forever.
For sure. And there are so many other ways for you to part with arts. You can definitely give it to a family member, or you can auction it out, or even donate it for a good cause. Like there's so many different ways depending on what you're looking for. And you can, or I know some people who have rotation exhibits in their homes. So they have more pieces
Yeah.
that they can show at the same time, and they change them like based on the season or whatever, and they become their own curators in a way.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I like that idea. I, for a while, was storing art and changing out, and I got to the point where I thought we don't need to have art in closets. Although I've been trying for years to be a more minimal person, so that kind of, goes in the face of that. Trying not to be a collector of too many things, let's say.
For sure. And being a gallery owner and having so many different things to juggle, you don't have any problems with having a physical space, all of the overhead costs and things like that. But are there any struggles at the moment that you think that you have to overcome being an online gallery owner?
Y- Yeah, I think it's similar and different. Like you said, costs are different. We manage different things, even though we don't have, say, a physical space to own or rent. We manage our website, which also takes lots of time and effort. And I mean, from any gallery perspective, I think you're always worried about attracting the right collection of artists and keeping them there and working with them in a way that helps them and helps you, figuring out your marketing strategy. Because as we've talked about with UGallery, it's changed so much over the years. So always paying attention to seeing what's working, what's not, where are you spending your money. Um, and then for us, really keeping up with technology and design, because you can imagine what our website looked like 20 years ago versus today. In fact, we just spent the last 18 months or so completely rebuilding the infrastructure of our whole website, redesigning it, everything, colors, fonts, logos, and uh, I feel like that might even move faster than with physical galleries where your space doesn't really change that much from decade to decade. But with any business, you have your concerns like that, and I think people who stay in business long enough know you kind of ride these tides to the highs and lows in the market, and just getting really good at that, knowing what to look for, and realizing today is today, but you should be looking like 6 months, 1 year, and 5 years ahead as well at the same time, and having your plans for each of those things.
Exactly. And I really like that you work very close with the artists that you represent. And I feel that artistic identity is one of the questions that I get all the time because artists, for example, one style of theirs is selling really well, but they want to experiment and do something different. So, how artists can keep their integrity and not being trapped by this market or selling well just one particular genre or style?
Yeah, it's a great question. That comes up a lot for us too. I mean, I think that artists are a lot like sole proprietorships in the sense that they're running their own business, they're creating this product. And I think that if they can look at their art both from an emotionally connected standpoint, but also from the fact that it is something they're trying to sell for money, they can establish kind of a mission statement for themselves and use that as a guiding point. I always tell artists, don't follow market trends. Like, don't go to the art fairs every year and change what you do based on that. Have something that is your style and continue to refine it. If I look through the history of art, and particularly now in contemporary art, the people you see who are doing the best for themselves have defined something that's theirs. And you could go to any place in the world and look at the piece and say, like, well, yeah, I know that's a, I don't know, Jeff Koons or Damien Hirst or something like that. Those people have this kind of mission of what they're doing. They have their style. And then really just paying attention like a business does every year, evaluating their plan, see where it fits, not being afraid to make changes when necessary, but not just changing with the wind because it sounds good. I think any successful artist or business, they painstakingly stick to the core for years and years and years, and that's how you get to be great. It's not always exciting, but that's usually what it takes to be kind of known.
For sure. And I think the change or the ability and excitement to do something different always comes from scrolling on Instagram, seeing what other people are doing and kind of comparing yourself all the time. Oh, he's doing well, way better, or I'm also want to do this, XYZ. Do you think social media in general is important for artists? And do you look for artists who are super active on Instagram, or it doesn't really matter?
We don't pay really much attention to artists' social media presence. What we pay attention to is artists' overall web presence. And mostly what we're looking for is people who are too saturated and in too many places. Because for us, it becomes really hard to tell a good story if they post the same art and the same thing on 10 different websites. It doesn't look special anymore. And more so, it's usually confusing because there'll start to be discrepancies in price or little details about the artwork, and then people question if the art is original. And so for us, it's more of an issue of being overly exposed. But for us, social media has not been a driver of business for us pretty much ever. Kind of back to who's using it and why they're using it. I know some people talk about social media being good for their gallery business, but for us, we really rarely see anyone come from Instagram or Facebook and buy art from us. It's mostly artists using it. So maybe it even becomes a little bit of that echo chamber too, where artists are comparing themselves to each other. And I'm all for more information. I think the internet is great for connecting people, but you also have to be careful too, because it can go the other way and it can be overwhelming. And everyone talks about it in different ways. But yeah, for us, I don't have much of an importance in our curation for artists who are active on Instagram.
Yeah, and I feel like for me personally, with my online gallery, Instagram was really important during the pandemic, where a lot of people were home on Instagram, buying through Instagram. And after the pandemic, like right now, for the last 2 years, it's been mostly word of mouth or like Google ads and all those things we do for marketing, and people coming directly to the website, not through social media. So I feel like
Yeah.
the same thing is it's mostly artists following artists and all those things, people not shopping anymore on those platforms. But also you started talking about the mistakes artists do, like price consistency is number one for me too, like you do have to. There's
Yeah.
also this dilemma of like, oh, I don't want to depend on just one gallery, especially if it's just online gallery. So what is your take on being on too many platforms because you just want to sell more, or being more curated in the selection?
Yeah, I tell artists the same thing, that you don't want to have one point of failure. So relying on one gallery, physical or online, is never a good plan. Because what happens if that gallery goes out of business or stops selling your work or whatever? But then you also kind of got to look in the other direction too and say, what makes sense from the perspective of the client? I always tell artists, work with multiple galleries, but differentiate what you're doing with them. Give them different series of work completely so that they're not competing against one another. Galleries can help each other sell more of an artist's work. And also, I think there is this advantage if you can be in multiple venues without kind of diluting your business. I have one artist friend. He's amazing. He goes and takes trips. He'll spend a month or two in a city. He'll develop a series of work based on the city, and then he'll go and find a local gallery to sell the work. And then he'll go do it in a different place. And so he's got this very signature style. It's his work. You can always tell it's his work, but all the work is different. And he's selling in different locations. He gets to make these awesome trips out of it. And it doesn't dilute what he does. And so I think there are multiple strategies for how an artist can do that. But it really is important not to kind of oversaturate the market. And the internet, of all places, it's like having 10 galleries next door to each other. You Google an artist's name and all the galleries show up. And if you just start walking in and opening the doors, you see different stuff there, like price inconsistency. It's a deal breaker for people. They just leave, they never come back.
Yeah, and for me, it's also like you don't want to create your art as a product that can be seen everywhere, or like that it becomes a mass-produced quote unquote artwork.
Yeah.
You still want to
Yeah.
have a bit of an exclusivity and limit the
Yeah.
places where people can go to.
Yeah, I also always advise artists to think real carefully about reproduction business, because there's not a huge amount of money in it unless you can do it at massive scale. People think, oh, great, I'll sell prints of my art, and that'll be another revenue stream. But most, especially online, but most print sites, they're going to give you maybe a couple dollars, if that, for each print you sell. So you realize if you're selling original paintings for a couple $1,000s and you're selling prints for a couple dollars each, you have to sell thousands of prints in order to get back to one original artwork. And then I think that those sites can also be diluting in a way. Not necessarily the same customer buying prints and originals, but the way it looks online isn't necessarily the best appearance. So I always caution people, approach that stuff gradually, see how it looks for others. And some things are hard to take back, like online web presence. That stuff follows you for a long time. So just being really conscious of going slow as opposed to going all in and then figuring out how to fix that.
I agree 100%. And do you have any recommendations for artists on pricing their works? Because I know some people use formulas, some people look at what other artists quote their work for, things like that.
I think it really just depends where artists are at. If they're getting started out, my advice is see what others in the market are doing similarly and how they're pricing. And I always tell artists start lower, because the best thing you can do is start selling some pieces, get some experience, and raise your prices from there. My mom was the hardest working person I ever knew. And her philosophy when she was a potter was, she said, if I can make one pot and sell it, then I have the money to make 4 more pots and sell those. And then you start to see where the income comes in. And then when she had her gallery business, she knew exactly how much art she had to display in order to make money to, keep the business going and growing. And so I think it's the same with artists. Now making anything, you have to sell one thing so you can make more and keep growing your business. And then my advice always is raise prices gradually every year. Don't do no price raises for 5 years and then decide to 100% increase your prices. That's going to be a shock to the market. But increase your prices 5 to 10% a year. Try and keep up with your costs and your inflation and see what happens. If people buy or buy more, you can keep going. If sales slow down, then you have to see where you're at and make adjustments. But pricing is like art in itself, right? You have to keep playing with it to see where you find the right balance. And I try and advise artists on that. I think that's the role of a gallery too, to give people good advice, and using size as kind of a gauge is good as well, where prices go up the bigger the pieces. Clients don't understand what's more precious. If a smaller piece is more than a larger piece, it's just confusing. So even though that doesn't always kind of translate to an artist process or how much time they spend on a piece or the emotional impact, I think pricing by size is a good strategy overall for what clients do know.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's way easier. I know a lot of clients ask sometimes for commissions, and then it's easy when like this is my pricing based on lens by widths, whatever it is, dollar, euro amount. And then it's quite easy for them to understand too the logic between pricing sometimes.
Yeah.
For sure. And then when we talk about art or art industry in general, there are a lot of myth and misinformation that some people don't know about art or maybe want to know. Do you want to break any myth on this podcast today?
I don't know. That's a good question. Um, I think that the big myth of the art world is just the kind of notion that art is this big, expensive, rarefied thing that exists in the stratosphere of the wealthy. Because really, the vast majority of art is really accessible. Most galleries are run by artists or people who love art. It's a labor of love, and I guess I feel like media portrayal of the art world takes it into a vastly different space, but most people are just doing this for the sheer love of it. And so from my perspective, it's one of those industries that's it's not so confusing once you spend time in it, but from the outside it looks really confusing. But mostly it's like really a lot of mom and pop industries just doing the thing that they love, and I think that's great.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you. And every gallery owner I talk to, they're amazing people. They're so passionate about their artists, and even supporting them and all the artists. It's always like make my heart, I don't know, warm when every
Yeah.
people come in without even knowing about art, but just also adding to the local economy when they support like local businesses and things like that. But also for all the emerging art professionals listening, what is your advice for them? Like how they can start? Like I personally really understand that business is like for the long-term game, it's not going to be shiny and easy and fun all the time. Like you have to be ready to have very slow periods and then very like periods where it's a lot of sales and things like that. So it's a long-term game and
Yeah,
commitment.
well, I think that's good advice. And really, my observation is just anything that you want to do is hard. There's a lot of competition in every space in the world. And if you care about the arts, I encourage anyone to join this industry. I don't think it's the place to go to make the most money in the world, but I think it's a really interesting and fulfilling place to go. Getting to work around art and artists is unique and special, and you actually can make money. I'm not saying that, but more so just saying, the reasons for being involved in it are really fulfilling. And I support people who want to come into this business. I've been doing it for nearly 2 decades because I really love doing it, and I expect that that will just keep being the case for me too. It's always something new. Um, Even though, technically we're selling the same thing, it's always all different. And I love that. I get the same kind of excitement looking at art each week as I did in 2006. So I think that's a really good sign.
Yeah, I feel like for us, every day is different, and you
Yeah.
meet so many different people through different works of life, culture, whatnot. And it's always like the first sale for them is the most exciting thing that you go through them,
Yeah.
like the whole experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Supporting artists is a really good thing. The world needs more art always. So anyone who's about that, I say go for it.
Exactly. And then looking into the future for the industry, do you see any new trends coming up, or how do you see the industry changing?
Hmm. Um, well, I think for the online industry, this is still a space that is evolving. There are these big marketplaces, but I really feel like there's this opportunity for more of the specialized galleries that are focused on fewer artists, but really doing it as a curated process. That's what I would love to see. I don't know if that will be the case, but for me, I think that speaks more to what the history of the gallery world has been like, as opposed to mega galleries. It's mostly not. And, there's still going to be realistically consolidation in the online art market space, since I don't think those marketplaces can go on forever showing the same artists, same artworks like we're talking about. I think some of them will win out. But really, to me, the gallery world, the physical gallery world, um, is very similar as it was a long time ago. Maybe adopting some new tech, but it's kind of unchanged, and in a good way too. I think that it speaks to the longevity of the business, and again, people passionate about showing art in person.
Yes, absolutely. And for everyone listening who would like to learn more about you and the gallery, where they should go.
Our website is ugallery.com, and if you have questions for us, you can reach us at info@ugallery.com. We're also on social media too. If you want to connect with us on Instagram, the handle is ugallery.
Absolutely. And I recommend everyone go and check UGallery. It's a fantastic gallery, lots of amazing talents, artists, artworks. So I spent at least an hour just browsing and looking what I like and finding some new talents that I really admire. And Alex, thank you so much for this conversation, sharing your knowledge, your look, and supporting all the artists working out
Thank you
there.
so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.